Thank you, Stephen. I would like to say that to Stephen and Kevin, I'm very grateful for your leadership in high performance home building and the transition to net zero, and for inviting me here this morning to have this conversation with you. So thank you very much. I'm not so sure everybody quite understands the difference between a net zero ready or net zero home and a standard code built home. Builders are required by Ontario Building Code to build to a minimum standard, which is current building code. The net zero ready, net zero home is about 5 tiers beyond the current standard for code built home. And Landark has decided on their own that they're going to do this, and it's not a requirement of the province at this point in time, and it's a demonstration of great leadership. And there are a few builders that are leading the way in Ontario and across Canada in terms of net zero home construction, and Landark is definitely one of them. So yeah, very grateful for you in that pursuit, Stephen, and for taking that on. And Kevin has kept me very honest over the last couple of years, because his level of detail in his questions forces me to remember that sometimes not everybody understands this thing. It's a bit of a complex conversation. There's a lot of moving parts to it. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to touch on as much as I can from a high level. We don't have the time to go deeply into any one aspect of this, but I'm definitely going to be around for questions and conversation afterwards. So, don't hesitate to approach. And if we don't get your questions answered during this presentation, I'd be happy to do so. And so I'm Will Beardmore, president of Bluewater Energy. And just to start off, I guess, Andrew, whom some of you may or may not know, asked me why only one L in Will this morning before we started. And so I have a simple explanation for that. Will with 2 L's is a word. And I was in the military for 20 years prior to starting Bluewater Energy as an infantry officer. And when I heard the phrase fire at will, it became a little bit concerning for me. So I changed my name from Will with 2 L's to Will with 1 L to differentiate the name from the word and point people in another direction when the word of command was issued for that. So, all right, without further ado, here's what we're going to talk about. Watercolor Westport aims to be, is already planned and already underway to be a net zero ready community, and is planned to be a full net zero community powered by the sun. And part of the thing that has to happen in order for that to come to fruition is, you as potential home buyers or home buyers have to also personally, individually make the decision to go solar if it aligns with your goals and with your ability to do so. And so I'm going to help sort of provide some perspective on what that can offer for you if you do decide to make that decision. So we're going to talk about, I'm going to give you just a quick background on Bluewater Energy, who we are and what we do, and that's going to be sort of wrapped up in our mission statement. I'll talk about energy transformation, because that's something that is underway in the province, and it is something that is going to propel the way things happen in the future. I'll talk about our test case here, the Sydenham bungalow, and sort of what we've done already at the bungalow, what that looks like, and we'll talk about sort of all of the features and benefits that are now being experienced there. And then we'll talk about some values that matter with respect to going solar as well as other renewables. And then I do want to focus throughout the presentation on whether energy independence is possible, and whether it's possible from many different perspectives, from a technological perspective, from a regulatory and code perspective, from an affordability perspective. I think this is the thing that, is the biggest question is solar worth the cost? And if I do decide to go down that road, is energy independence a possibility for me, for my home, for my family? And so I do want to talk about that. All right, so our mission at Bluewater Energy is to deliver premium smart energy solutions through exceptional client experiences that empower sustainable living and accelerate the transition to low carbon communities. And when we say low carbon communities, what we mean is there is a massive trend across Canada, and we're experiencing it very much so in Ontario, to transition from gas to all electric, whereby reducing demand on grid, which still has some fossil fuel components to it. And then in order to do that, what is required is a change in the way energy is generated, transmitted, and distributed throughout the province, and homes are very much becoming a part of that solution. So we aim to facilitate and to enable that as quickly as possible. And our values certainly center around quality, affordability, long-term value for our clients, homeowners and business owners, elegant design, because we know that aesthetics are important, expert workmanship. We spend a lot of time training and retraining our teams so that we're able to deliver the highest value and the highest quality. And then reliability. We want to deliver systems that work for the long term. A typical solar installation is going to perform for 25 plus years, and so we want to ensure that it's going to do that, and it's going to do that without you having to even think about it. All right, so energy transformation. What is happening across Canada? Well, I mean, it stems from what is happening around the world. We're seeing the conversation focus quite heavily on climate change and on what can be done to mitigate the effects that are sort of leading, or the behaviors that are leading to climate change effects. And so in Canada, we've adopted an approach that is quite aggressive, and the federal government has implemented carbon taxes in order to incentivize behavior change and to sort of shift the emphasis on burning fossil fuels to operate our homes, to doing so electrically. And so there's a forecast that has recently been produced by Electricity Canada that sort of summarize where the direction by province has to go in order to meet this transformation and the growing demand on the grid. And it's estimated that Ontario is going to have to double our energy generation capability in the next 10 years. And so what does that mean? Well, that means that there's going to have to be investment. And where does that money come from? Excuse me. That investment comes from taxpayer dollars, which we contribute, and or rate increases. And so, our view is that we can mitigate some of that because we have individuals, we have business owners, we have developers, we have home builders, and we have home buyers who are willing to, thank you very much, who are willing to bring private capital and invest their own hard-earned money in order to be part of the solution here. And so every home that transitions to, renewable energy and an independently operating solar array contributes to the solution in a meaningful way. And if we think about it this way, 100 homes with solar equals approximately an additional megawatt of generation capacity on the grid. And so we can see generation capacity increase quite quickly with minimal amount of involvement. And so the forecast in Ontario alone is that in the next 10 years, there's a housing stock shortage already, and in the next 10 years, we need to build 1.5 million homes. So if 100 homes can generate a megawatt or add a megawatt of capacity to the grid, what does 1.5 million add to the grid? It adds over a gigawatt. And that's assuming, all homes that are built have some amount of solar on them, which probably isn't realistic, but it becomes very meaningful very quickly. So as we move to net zero and we move to accomplish federal and provincial net zero targets, home builders are doing that by building higher performance homes that require less energy to operate and consume less energy over the course of the year. That's a very important part of the equation because prior to the net zero program and prior to this shift to high performance home building, it was actually not possible to get a typical single detached, semi-detached, multi-unit residence to net zero because the loads in the home were so high. So the focus first became, how do we build a more efficient, more high-performing home? How do we decrease the energy consumption in the home? And then how do we offset that which is left with renewable energy? And so that's where the net zero program comes from, because the Canadian Home Builders Association laid out the pathway to net zero and laid out the standards for construction for a net zero home, and then allowed us, with the existing roof space or square footage available on a typical home, to then install enough solar capacity to get that home to net zero. There are increasing operational costs that are coming along with home ownership and just being a human in the world today. And so, certainly gas prices are going up and will continue to go up as year over year the carbon tax increases as it's intended to do so. And in addition, as I said, the investment in infrastructure that's going to be required in order to meet the growing demand in electricity is going to mean more tax dollars being spent on that infrastructure or rate increases to pay for that infrastructure. And so as much of that we can mitigate as possible with doing things like solar and renewable energy at the individual home level is a leading way to offset your operational costs as a homeowner. And then, we are experiencing more and more rather chaotic and more frequent weather events, which has translated over the last 5 to 10 years to increasing weather outage or power outages due to weather events. And so renewables, solar with some energy storage, gives us the ability to build resiliency into the home and for you to be able to keep the lights on when the power goes out, which is becoming, energy security is becoming a more important part of the conversation over time as we see things sort of I'm not going to say worsen, but as we see the problem become a little more exacerbated. And then all of this leads to energy independence. And so, is energy independence possible for the average homeowner? Well, I think we're going to get into a cost here about affordability in a minute. And I think that, we're at the point right now in the transition where it is not economically feasible for every homeowner in Ontario to be able to make this move to energy independence. But the way we make that possible is the way all technology evolves over time, or how all technology sort of gets into common use over time, where we start with a small percentage of early adopters who bear the burden of a higher cost because it's new and it is progressing in the industry and in deployment. And so as we make that transition, as more homes are built with solar and more homeowners decide to go solar, what happens is the price of solar comes down. And we've seen that over the last 10 years. The price of solar has come down over 85%. So from 2010 to 2023, we've seen an 85% drop in the cost of solar. And that specifically translates into solar panels themselves. So that's not your overall cost of an installation, but the cost of solar panels, which was the highest component cost of the project and is now no longer so. And so we're going to see that same thing happen with energy storage over time as more energy storage is installed and as supply chains mature and develop, and as manufacturing processes mature, then pricing naturally comes down. And what that requires is it requires those first individuals to lead the way and incentivize the rest of their communities and the rest of the population across the country to follow. All right, so that being said, rather long introduction. I'm now going to speed up a little bit in the interest of time, and I want to leave as much time as possible for conversation at the end. So those who are not yet aware and haven't had the pleasure, the opportunity of walking through the model home down the street, the Sydenham at Watercolor Westport, we have a 10.6 kilowatt solar array installed on the roof, and we have 1 Tesla Powerwall in the garage that provides 5 kilowatts of peak output power and 13.5 kilowatt hours of storage capacity, combined with an energy management system, which I'll talk about a little bit, in order to preserve backup power during a grid outage. The home can fully sustain itself indefinitely as long as the sun is shining, and then for shorter periods of time depending on energy use within the home when the sun is not shining. And I say that because when the sun is shining, the solar is going to provide additional charge into the battery bank from which the home is going to be drawing power. And when the sun is not shining, then that battery bank has to carry the home on its own through that period of time until we see the sun come out again. Now let's talk about affordability. Affordability is a uniquely personal question. And so, am I going to tell you it is or is not affordable? I am not. That's a question that you're going to answer for yourself. Now, it is not inexpensive. That's a fact. And the reason is that we're actually doing some meaningful things with technology that some of which is still in the early stages, as I said, like energy storage, and some of which is in more mature stages of supply, manufacturing, and availability, like solar panels, which has caused the price to come down. Cost depends on the size, which is the capacity, the generation capacity of the solar array, which is fully dependent on how much energy you are going to require in the home. And that is determined by an energy model, which is done ahead of time by Landark's energy advisor, who then says the home is designed to operate on a certain amount of energy consumption over the course of the year. And we design a solar array to meet that requirement and that demand. And I'll talk about how that grid interaction and how the solar array generated power feeds both your home as well as interacts with the utility. And so a properly designed, right-sized solar array is one in which is the minimum size required to meet your energy demand without being any larger than that. So that keeps the size and the cost of the array to that which you need specifically for your home to generate only the amount of energy that you're going to require, because anything above and beyond that isn't going to be of benefit to you. And so it's part of the Ontario regulation for the net metering program that says, you know, we want homeowners to be able to offset their energy consumption, but we don't want people generating excess amounts of power and overburdening the grid. And so that's where we aim to deliver, is right in that spot where we build a system, we design a system and build a system that is only large enough to meet your needs. And so therefore you're not spending more money than you have to, and you're not generating more than you're going to be consuming. And so if we do this right, and we've had quite a bit of experience of doing it, and we are validating our models versus actual installations and real world performance, and we're finding that we're within about 2 to 5%. And the reason why there's variation is because weather patterns vary year over year. And so, you know, we do get fluctuations in total generation output year over year based on weather patterns. But over time, we're very consistent, and we see that our predictive models are coming very close to what the system is actually doing. Solar array has a 25 plus year operational life. And so, you know, when you make an investment like this, you absolutely want it to be something that will operate for 25 years, and also something that you're not going to have to maintain, think about, or worry about. It's automatic. There's no moving parts. There's no annual maintenance costs. So it's something that operates independently of your awareness or not. It's a passive system that silently converts sunlight into electricity, feeds it into your home, synchronizes it with grid power, and exports when you have excess energy generation, and allows import from the grid, i.e. purchase of electricity from the grid when the sun is not shining. And so from a homeowner standpoint, in terms of operation and maintenance, there is no requirement for your involvement, and there's no ongoing costs for such after installation, which is a highly appealing aspect of solar energy generation. All right, so I do want to talk about and possibly allay some concerns on what is happening on my roof and how does this thing actually attach, and do I have any concerns with that? And so what this picture shows is the bones of the system. So this is the mounting system that we put on the roof that we attach the solar modules to. And each one of these flashings right here is a lag bolt that is attaching into the top cord of the truss, that is providing the structural integrity and support for the system and securing it to the roof. And over top of that is a piece of anodized aluminum flashing that tucks into the shingle above, that provides complete weatherproofing and waterproofing. So as water comes down the slope of the roof, this metal flashing acts exactly as another asphalt shingle covering the penetration that we've made into the roof to tie in, and that penetration happens upslope, and then our attachment of the flashing to the rail system that holds the modules is done downslope. So, you know, gravity doing what it does brings water down the roof, and we have a completely weather-tight seal that is distributing the load over the entire square footage of the roof that we're installing upon, and it's shielding those asphalt shingles from direct exposure to sunlight.
25 years plus for solar array. I know sometimes they advertise that a shingle can last 25 years, but that's not the real situation. So.
And maybe we can just hold all the questions to the end.
Okay. Yeah, and solar modules are manufacturer warranted for 25 years. But we can come back to that. Okay, so another important consideration is, obviously family comes first for most of us, and lifestyle. And so how does renewable energy, solar and energy storage fit into, the decisions that you're going to make for your family and into your lifestyle choices? And so, it fits in very well from a home energy technology perspective, from an energy transformation perspective, but it provides the capability to understand energy consumption in the home at a much deeper level, understand how you use electricity, and understand what you can do and what decisions you can make to reduce your energy consumption further and become an even greener, more efficient home and lower your costs even further. And so the way that it does this is by providing real-time feedback to you through an easily understandable and very visually sort of appealing app that provides instantaneous energy consumption data, instantaneous energy generation data, storage, state of charge in the storage bank, as well as the ability to control loads at the individual level. And I'll talk about a little bit of that in a second here. This is an example of the energy monitoring system that I was just referring to. And so, we're able to see what our peak loads are over time. We're able to see what happens to that peak load when your air source heat pump comes on and goes off, when you plug in your electric vehicle to charge it, when somebody leaves the lights on in the basement downstairs. All of these things can provide the ability for you to make much more and much better informed decisions. And so here's some of the data that you'd get from a typical dashboard from having solar and battery installed. We can see over here, the system tells us how much energy the home is consuming at any point in time, how much energy the solar array is generating, and whether energy is being brought in from the grid or whether it's being sent out to the grid. And so what this graph here shows us is that the green is consumption and the orange is generation. And so everywhere we see orange greater than green, it means that we're generating more electricity than we're consuming in the home, and that energy is going out to the grid. And under the Ontario Net Metering Program, the homeowner gets credit for that exported generation. And then that exported generation credit carries forward on the bill for up to 12 months. And so the idea is that we're over generating through the summer months and then establishing a credit which carries forward into the fall and winter. And then throughout the period of fall and winter where we experience fewer daylight hours, more overcast skies, what is happening is those credits are there then being applied to your utility bill, effectively continuing to bring it to zero. And then, like I said, a properly designed right-sized system is only going to generate as much energy as you require over the course of the year. And so at the end, as we come out of the winter time into the spring, we've essentially used all of those credits, and now we're starting over that process again. And so that's how that works effectively. Functionality. And so, what level and what kind of functionality does a solar and battery and energy monitoring and control system add to your home? Well, it allows you to obviously generate your own clean electricity, which you provide to your home first as primary path, and then export to the grid as a secondary. Store excess power, which can be used at any point in time according to any current and possible future initiatives that are going to come from utilities and from the Ontario government. And we're seeing that, we have this thing called the new ultra-low overnight rate, which is due to be available in all markets by mid-November, end of November, which is a very interesting sort of rate structure in that the overnight rate for electricity goes down to 2 cents a kilowatt hour, but the peak rate for electricity goes up to 24 cents a kilowatt hour. So it's highly beneficial in terms of, do I want to charge my electric vehicle overnight at 2 cents a kilowatt hour? Absolutely. But then what do I do during that peak period when electricity costs 24 cents a kilowatt hour? Well, what we do is we use the stored power in the battery bank to carry the home through that period of time. And essentially you're paying zero during that period of time because you're using your own stored energy, and you're getting deeply discounted electricity on the overnight rate. So these are some of the possibilities that exist when we have renewables in the home and we have the ability to control and determine how we use power. Now, obviously, you know, there's a huge resiliency factor that gets built in, particularly when we have battery storage. And just to clarify, it's important to understand that a solar array without a battery tied into it will not operate when the grid goes down. So during a power outage, if you have solar on the home and you don't have a battery, that solar array is required by code to shut down. And so you won't have any power available. However, when we tie that in with a battery bank and we put some other control components in that manage that power to prevent us from exporting anything to the grid during a power outage, you'll have full power in the home from that system. And so that's an important understanding and determination and distinction. And so power management, essentially what we can do is we can control individual circuits in the home, and we can do that for one circuit, for 5 circuits, or for all circuits. And why would you want to do this? Well, the reason we actually want to do this is, you know, the adding battery storage to your renewable energy system adds a cost component, and there's a consideration there then how much additional cost are you willing or able to accept, and how much battery storage does that translate into. And so backing up an entire home with battery becomes a pretty expensive endeavor. So the medium, the more optimal way to do it is to control the loads in the home, start with a moderate amount of battery storage, and then prioritize those loads according to, you know, what lifestyle and what mechanical systems are most important, i.e. in the wintertime it's going to be heating, in the summertime possibly air conditioning, lights, plug loads, things like that. And so with power management system, when the grid goes out, it will automatically, based on predetermined settings that we have input or that you have input into the control hardware and software, will automatically shut down non-priority loads and keep only priority loads energized, thereby extending the life and duration of your backup period from battery storage. And so it also gives you real-time energy monitoring, as well as the ability to remotely shut loads on and off. So if you leave the home and you forget to turn, you know, the lights out or the stove's still on, the system will notify, you click a button and it's turned off, and then you can turn on loads likewise. If somebody's coming home, it's dark, you forgot to turn the exterior lights on, you want to make sure the lights are on when they get there, you click a button, the lights come on. And so these are all features and functionalities that are integrated into the system when you go down that path of solar and renewable energy and energy independence. Aesthetics. Landark is building a beautiful home. Obviously, there's going to be questions around what is that going to look like if I decide to add solar panels to the roof. And so, you know, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I have a saying that I tend to sort of, you know, share as much as I possibly can, because I want to help people understand that this is not a terrible looking thing. I actually think solar is sexy. And so, you know, you could fault me for that, but I think over time the eye sort of begins to understand that what those solar modules on the roof are doing is so meaningful, that, you know, the beauty is not on the surface level. It's more about what is actually happening below the surface and how it is making life better for yourselves and your community and the rest of the country. So it's a visible representation of your energy independence. It's a demonstration of leadership, individual responsibility and accountability. And the look of the interior of the home is unchanged. So, I mean, you know, we tend to target the rear of the home or the left and the right elevations when we're adding solar modules, so that streetscape view is still, you know, preserved and still something that you want it to be and look like, and then use the remainder of the roof surfaces and roof planes for the solar generation component. So I do want to talk briefly about vehicle to home and vehicle to grid. And so when we start talking about the introduction of electric vehicles and the adoption of electric vehicles, that brings a rather significant amount of stored energy along with it, energy for which you're paying to charge. And then in a grid outage situation, is there a possibility for us to reach into that vehicle, pull energy out, and supply it back into the home? And so the answer to that is yes. However, yes. However, the technology is still sort of working towards getting to the point where it's enabled functionality in every vehicle, as well as the electric vehicle charger, because the electric vehicle charger has to be the component that can send electricity to the vehicle or pull electricity out of the vehicle and back to the home. And then there are a number of regulatory and code requirements that are going to have to be satisfied in order to make this happen. So we want to bring this up in the conversation, and we want to draw attention to it because there's a lot of conversation happening around this. You probably see some things in the media, or if you're perusing the internet, you'll see people talking about this more and more. So it is a possibility. It is not an immediate right now thing. It is probably another 2 to 3 year thing, but it is going to be a way that we do things in the future for sure. And so this EV charger becomes an even more important, more integrated part of the energy plan for your home than simply just charging your vehicle. And sustainability. So again, it's estimated that within the next 10 years, Ontario is going to need to double our generation capacity. And that doesn't only necessarily include generation, but also the transmission and distribution of that electricity so it gets to the point of use. And so, I have seen personally announcements within the last 3 months from the Ministry of Energy that have outlined commitments to spend $1.3 billion for pre-construction consultation costs for a new nuclear reactor at Bruce power plant, and over $1 billion for refurbishing a reactor at the Pickering-Darlington plant. And so that's a significant amount of our taxpayer dollars that are being committed to that. And again, I'm not suggesting that the solution is everyone goes solar and then we fix this thing and we walk hand in hand off into the sunset. What I am suggesting is that it is a very real and meaningful way to mitigate some of these costs that are being spent, alleviate the pressure on the grid, and reduce the amount of generation that the province actually has to build. And so there's lots of environmental benefits that go along with generating clean renewable energy. And where that comes from is we still have a natural gas component on our grid. And so when we hit peak periods during, it's normally late afternoon through the latter half of the summer, and our base load of generation capacity can't handle that, then the province brings natural gas fired peaker plants online to make up for that deficit. Solar energy and stored energy and batteries in homes are a very meaningful part of the solution to that. And in particular, Hydro One is running a pilot project right now where the initiative is to put 2 Tesla Powerwall in 1,000 homes. And we're actually one of the companies who are installing those Powerwalls for Hydro One in those homes. And the idea is that when that power is needed, it can be aggregated, it can be pulled out of those homes, and it can be put onto the grid to reduce the amount of energy that's required from peaker plants, to provide black start capabilities in grid outages, and other interesting features. And so there are going to be opportunities for homeowners who have energy storage to participate in programs with utilities to allow the utilities to reach in and pull some of that stored energy out. And just as I said previously, where if we have 100 homes with solar, we have a megawatt of additional generation capacity on the grid. If we have 100 homes with Powerwall and stored energy, we have 1.5 megawatts of stored energy in those homes. So one home on the surface doesn't appear like it's going to solve the problem, but many homes aggregated contributing to the solution here becomes very meaningful. All right, so the process here by which we took the Sydenham bungalow from design to net zero, obviously Landark gets all the recognition for designing and building the home. From the design to the mechanicals to the insulation to the wall assemblies to the triple pane windows to the low air changes. And that is something that's an absolute requirement. And, before we even start to have the conversation about a home getting into net zero and adding solar to it. And so what we've done is we've taken essentially the energy model that was done for the home. And this is what is during the design phase, going to give us the guidance we need as to how large a system is going to be required. We take the plan set for the home, including the architectural drawings, the site plan, and then the roof design, including the truss layout. And then we turn that into a scaled three-dimensional model, and we orient it according to how that home's actually going to sit on the lot in the real world. And then we determine which roof planes are going to be the most efficient for solar. And ideally, as I said previously, we're targeting the rear of the home and the left and the right so that we keep that streetscape view clear and clean for you as a homeowner. And then the solar is sort of even tucked further out of the way and out of mind, and it can just silently do its thing. And so once we have that scaled 3D model, then we start to lay out the solar, which then gives us, so here's the design for the Sydenham, and then here is the installed solar on the Sydenham, which turned out exactly according to design. We factor in losses for generation and electricity conversion from what solar modules generate, which is DC power, to AC power, which is what we get from the grid. And so there are losses in the power conversion. There's losses that are attributed to environmental factors. There's losses due to the orientation of the array and the tilt of the array, which is based on the pitch of the roof. And then there are losses due to snow and dust and other sort of accumulation on the surface of the modules, as well as that DC-AC conversion. And so we factor all of those into the model because what we want to do is we want to give you a very accurate idea of here is the size of the array that you require for this home to get to net zero based on the modeling that has been done. Here is the cost for that. Here is the energy that it will generate over the course of the year. And then we normally target between 99 to 101% because we don't want you generating more than you're going to be consuming because there's no benefit to you as a homeowner to do that. You get no compensation for any energy that you generate over and above what you consume over the course of the year. So there's no reason to spend more money than you have to on an array that is larger than you're going to need. And so we target the energy model so that we're only generating what you require. And then on an annual basis, here's that sort of that graph that I showed from a daily perspective out on the year timeline. And so we could see in the winter months, we're consuming more energy from the grid than we're generating. And in the summer months, we're generating more than we're consuming. Over the course of the year, this excess generation gets applied during these periods of less generation in order to make the home net zero. And that's through what's called the Ontario Net Metering Program. What that translates into from a utility savings and a cost savings for you as a homeowner is the elimination of your volumetric associated charges on your utility bill. So your cost per kilowatt hour, as well as in addition to the volumetric charges associated with delivery and transmission and distribution. And so, electricity isn't just how much per kilowatt hour does it cost us for, according to what the OEB has set the rate to be, but it's also all of the other charges that are tacked onto that for getting that electricity to your front door that the utility companies have to charge in order to maintain and operate the distribution system. And so those are the delivery and the transmission charges and things like that. Now, we don't ever take that bill to zero because there's a fixed monthly fee that is required for you to have an account, which is your utility meter and that connection to the grid. And so that doesn't go away, but we can eliminate all the other volumetric associated charges through electricity generation with solar PV. And so this is where your cost savings comes in, and this is where we do that financial comparison as to from a affordability and a financial standpoint, does solar make sense? Because we now have to say, okay, based on the capital investment for the system and based on the energy savings over time, what does that translate into in terms of a return on investment. And it's not straight math because we do have to take into consideration what the cost of electricity is going to do over time as well, because it's not going to stay flat. And so we build a 7-8% increase year over year on electricity rates, compare that to the amount of generated power, translate that into cost savings on a monthly annual basis, and then put that against the cost of the system to provide you that financial analysis. All right, so this is my last slide here, and I just want to address some questions that we get asked pretty frequently, which are, what is net metering? And so net metering is a program that allows homeowners to have solar energy installed on their home, generate power, feed that power into their home directly, and then export excess power for credit. Credit carries forward for up to 12 consecutive months, and it's an Ontario regulation, so it's not an option for utilities to say you either can or cannot. It's regulated at the provincial level, and it's a requirement for utilities to offer it. There is one stipulation to that. There are parts of the grid that are at what is called capacity, and they're constrained, and so we're unable to connect any new generation in certain areas of Ontario because of grid constraints until rules change and some infrastructure upgrades happen. How does solar impact my property value? So a long time ago, not that long ago, but 2010, the feed-in tariff program came out. There was a lot of conversation about what happens to my property value and will affect my taxes, my property taxes. And so the provincial government at the time said that MPAC cannot reassess the value of your home based on the addition of solar panels on the roof, and therefore there's no impact to property taxes or property value. What happens when it snows? Snow accumulates on the modules. When there is snow on the surface of the solar array, you're not going to get a lot of energy generation. But we do factor that into our modeling so that when we tell you here's what your system's going to do over the course of the year, we've already taken into account that there's going to be long stretches of the winter where it's going to be doing very little because it's going to be covered in snow. But what happens is typically after a snowstorm, the sun comes out, and then, because the surface of the module is glass and it's slippery, and because it sits at an angle and it's sloped, and because there is a voltage and a small current running through that module, the glass heats up and sheds snow much more quickly than your roof would otherwise. And so there's no requirement for maintenance or for snow clearing. It happens all on its own, and you don't have to lose sleep at night over the fact that there is snow on the modules, because we do build that into the model, and it's anticipated that that's going to happen because of the latitude that we live at. And so again, without battery storage, when the grid goes down, your solar array shuts down. So there's no backup power without battery storage as an added element of a solar installation. Maintenance costs are zero. So that the one component of maintenance that typically needs to be done is we wrap all of our solar installations in what is called a critter guard. It's a wire mesh, PVC coated, UV resistant, galvanized steel, and it keeps birds and squirrels and things like that out. Pigeons love to nest underneath solar arrays, and squirrels love to chew wires, both of which result in costly repairs. So we put that wire mesh around the exterior of the array to keep birds and other critters out. Sometimes after a winter, snow and ice can pull a section of that off. It needs to be reattached. It's a 5-minute fix, but in terms of maintenance, there's no preventative maintenance schedule. There's no cost for that. So once it's installed and you've spent the money for that installation, you're done. You just now receive the benefit of that year over year. What does it cost to insure the solar array? Most insurance companies at this point will add it to your home insurance at no extra cost, or for what we generally see at most is about $50 a year. So from an insurance cost perspective, it's very minor, if not negligible. What happens if I need to replace my roof? If the roof needs to be replaced, the solar modules come off the roof, the shingles get redone, the solar modules go back on. Now, solar modules will extend the life of the shingles over which they are installed, because those shingles aren't going to be exposed directly to sunlight and UV degradation, as well as they're going to be sheltered from the direct effects of weather. And so we've seen roofs where the areas outside of the solar array, the shingles need to be replaced, and as we've removed the solar modules, the shingles underneath were almost like new. It's quite remarkable. But they're, your shingles are going to last I don't know, 20 years, 25 years. We're installing probably 30, 35-year shingles now. The solar modules themselves are warranted by manufacturers for 25 years, as well as the other components. And so, you know, your expectation as a homeowner buying a home with solar with a brand new roof is probably you're never going to have to worry about that. How long does the system last? So we modeled 25 years in our forecast, but it's going to continue to work beyond that. There are solar panels that were installed at the Courtright Center in Toronto, which is like a research area, that were installed in the 60s. They're still generating power today, almost as efficiently as they were when they were installed. And so from a technology standpoint, it's going to continue to operate because it's you know what a solar module is? It's sand. Crystalline silicon wafers and glass that convert light energy into electricity through small conductors that wire those crystalline silicon wafers together. And so there's no moving parts and there's no technology to break down. And so it will operate for a very long time, and manufacturers are warranting it for 25 years. What happens if new technology becomes more efficient, and will my panels become out of date? And the answer to that is no, because when we design the system to generate enough energy to provide what you need over the course of the year, it's going to continue to do that for as long as that system's on your roof. And so as modules become more expensive or more efficient and technology improves, what that translates into is we can generate an equivalent amount of power on a smaller area because modules are becoming more efficient. But your installed solar array that generates 13,000 kilowatt hours today and next year and 10 years from now and 20 years from now is still going to generate close to 30, there is some degradation over time, close to that 13,000 kilowatt hours. And if that is what you require, there's no need to upgrade that equipment and spend any more money because it's still doing exactly what it was designed to do, which is what you needed in the first place. And then will the fire department let my house burn down if there's a fire? I can unequivocally tell you that the answer to that is no. We've installed solar on fire department headquarters in Guelph and a couple other cities around Guelph, as well as a number of fire stations themselves. And so this is a myth. I don't hear it very often anymore, but it is not a concern. In addition to that, codes change continuously over time and evolve and become more and more safety focused as the technology gets better understood. And every system that we installed has what's called rapid shutdown, which is that switch that you see on the outside of the house in the model home. As soon as that gets turned off, the system goes dead and there's no more electricity coming off of the roof. So there's a number of built-in safety factors in addition to the fact that fire departments are completely comfortable. I have not personally ever heard about a fire from a solar array in Ontario or Canada on a residence. So I think that question is moot at this point.